lot of people have behaviors that are dangerous. For instance, I did something recently, about 2 years ago, that could have killed me in 60 seconds. What did I do? I jumped out of an airplane. If the parachute didn't open, I'd be dead. But a lot of people do things that are risky to their behavior, but they're risky a long time later, so they have bad behaviors. Now, like this guy, he's really protected from the sun. He's got his sunglasses, his hat. Now, this is a bit extreme. I've never actually worn it, but fishermen sometimes do. So what's one of the dangers and the behaviors that you could have now that could hurt you later? Well, before we get to that, it made me think of something. A behavior that could kill you very quickly, that people know could kill them, and yet they still do it. Now, what if this guy was driving a car and he was texting? Be dead potentially in 60 seconds. Ultraviolet light is something you can't see, but just because it's something you can't see doesn't mean that it's not something that can hurt you. A lot of things that you can't see can hurt you. You might go into your garage and this is in your pocket and you don't know, and it can hurt you a lot. So what is ultraviolet light? Ultraviolet light is something that's invisible, but if you have a little detector that picks up ultraviolet, it'll show you that's in places you're not thinking. Here's an example. I took this picture, I went outside, it was January 8th, 2015, and it was 18 degrees. And here's the ultraviolet light, and it was positive. If I take that meter, here's the meter, if I take this meter and I put it right next to the window when I'm driving, it's going to come right through the side glass and it's going to light up. I bet you didn't know that. The next time you're at a supermarket, or maybe your parents, take a look at the side of their neck and see if the left side looks more damaged than the right side. So our first talk today is about ultraviolet. What is it? It's a form of radiation or energy. And it's a form of energy that's invisible light. You can't see it. Let's go back to some basic science. If you take a prism and it splits up the light into the rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, ultraviolet. Violet's 400 nanometers wavelength. Ultraviolet is a wavelength that's shorter than that. Technically, it goes from 10 to 400 nanometers. So what are the ultraviolet lights that can hurt you? UVA and UVB. Now, the dominant UV is actually called UVC. Way up in the sky, in most places in the world, there's an ozone, and it blocks that layer. It blocks that wavelength, UVC. But UVA and UVB do come through. So you're outside, you're walking along, and guess what? When I came here today, and I've never been here, I've been in Mooresville, and this area, 19 years, I've never been out where this school is, and I passed a couple of schools, and I saw some kids, a lot of young kids, elementary school, and they were out in the sun. I thought, well, they didn't really have sun protective clothing on. And remember, this invisible, but it really is visible if you take a UV meter. It's all over the place. I'll tell you something I did. I was at the beach, and I was under an umbrella. So I go, hey, I'm protected. Now, we'll talk later about ways to protect in more detail. But I said, well, hey, I'm protected. So I'm under the umbrella. Let me take the UV meter and see if anything pops up. And guess what? It lit up wickedly. We'll come back in a moment in the next lecture about reflection. So back to the question. What is ultraviolet light? Johnny, are you paying attention back there? Because I got eyes on you. Now, ultraviolet light, it's an invisible form of radiation that causes things like tanning and burns. Now, if you get a tan or a burn, it goes away, or does it? The burn might go away, and even the tan might go away, but the damage doesn't. And this is a damage that accumulates over a lot of years. I got a lot of years on you guys, probably about 40. I'm 50. But the things I did when I was your age make a difference at this age. And it's never too early to learn good behaviors. And the things that you need to do to protect yourself from ultraviolet. Because the damage that you get now is going to cause problems later. How do we know this? Maybe one of you, if you took your shirt off, would have freckles up here on your shoulder. I bet somebody in your class, one of you, has those freckles on your shoulder. And if I said to you, when did you get those freckles on your shoulder? You'd probably say, you know what, Dr. Wolf, I remember. It was that time I was at the beach with my parents, and I fell asleep in the sun, and I forgot to put my sunscreen on, and it was one exposure that made those freckles, and they never went away. When someone comes to my office, I know that that's a sign that they had ultraviolet radiation exposure. They've been in the sun, or a tanning bed. Is it possible that something you do today could kill you later? Well, we talked about texting and driving and jumping out of an airplane, but the answer is yes. The things you do today to protect yourself or not protect yourself can catch up with you later. How much later? I've had patients who died from melanoma who were only in their 20s. Now, what about the sun that you get this weekend or in the summer on your beach trip? That ultraviolet radiation. Can that actually produce changes for the rest of your life? The answer is yes. Here's another example. If you're outside a lot at a young age like yourselves, you can get more moles on your trunk, on your back, and your chest. And the more moles you have is a risk factor for a melanoma, for a cancer that can kill people. And that cancer is melanoma. So what you do today at age 10 or 11 or 12 can have an impact not only now, the sunburn or the tan that you get, later, and let's be serious here. You don't want to come back later to see me, because if you come back later to see me, I could have to do bad things to you. And I got to do bad things to people every day, like cut pieces of their skin off. Why? Because they didn't do what I'm teaching you to do, protect yourself. Or they thought they were protecting themselves. Remember, you can get the point now or get the point later. People often forget to protect themselves in places that they're not thinking about, like their ears. And every year, I have to do about 50 hours of surgery on different people's ears. That usually means I got to take a piece of their ear off. See? Like this one. And then I got to put a new piece of skin back on. Now, can you get that cancer in your 20s? Probably not. But your 20s is closer than you think. So let's just summarize about ultraviolet radiation. It's not something you can see with your eyes. It's an invisible form of radiation or energy. It can be picked up by an ultraviolet meter. Remember one of the things we said, when it was 18 degrees outside, there was ultraviolet light. If you put this meter right up to your side window, not the windshield, it picks up ultraviolet radiation. It comes through the side because the government hasn't regulated that window to be UVA protective. Only your windshield protects against UVA and UVB. In your house, you might be in the kitchen. If you take this UV meter and put it up next to that, it will light up inside. So there's more sources of ultraviolet radiation than you think. And there's more ways to get that radiation. Here's another point. Remember, there's a risk that you can get cancer later. But there's also a risk, and it's not a risk, it's a reality, that you can get ugly-looking skin. Because the more sun you've had, the more wrinkles you're going to get. There's a lot of different skin cancers, and I won't spend too much time on them. But examples include scabs that won't go away, or little sores that won't heal, or a cancer that could come from an exposure that you had as a child, like a mole that looks funny. So ultraviolet radiation is something that's a risk to you, but it might not be a risk for another 20 or 30 years, or maybe 40 or 50 years. When I was your age, I didn't think about it either, but today I do. And I see a lot of people who are my age and much younger who have problems. I also see young children who have had problems, like a mole that's precancerous or even cancerous. So just because you can't see something doesn't mean that it can't hurt you. Think of some of the things that we talk about today protecting us in the future. Like your parents, they put money away for retirement so they can protect you for the future. What do you do today? You learn so you can have opportunities for later. Hopefully, be able to go to a good school, maybe go to college, and find a better job. But a really basic thing that every day you can do is to protect from the sun, because the sun causes damage to your skin. The only person it doesn't cause damage to is if your color basically has never changed from the time you were born. Amazingly, even people with dark skin can get sunburns. In the United States and worldwide, well, in the United States, the Asian population and especially the Hispanic population have been the populations that have got the greatest risk of skin cancer, the greatest increase in skin cancer, in part because they think they're protected. And in fact, they're not protected either. Maybe a little bit more compared to someone very fair skinned. So ultraviolet radiation is an invisible thing that can harm you, and you need to protect from it. It's something that can cause cancer later. Remember, you'll get the point later if you don't get the point now. And it can also cause you to look much older than your age. At the age of 10 or 12, that might not mean a whole lot to you, but it's going to mean a lot to you when you're 25, 35, or 45. That's the end of our first segment about ultraviolet light.